Hello, Team Banfield. It's good to have you. Welcome to Monday. It's going to be a great week. I want to promise, but I can't go that far. I just know that we've got a lot, like an action-packed week, and it starts with today, which is busy and big. And I say big because if you were watching on Friday when the DA in Los Angeles said his piece about the Menendez brothers, if you're fans of the Menendez brothers, it was kind of like a gut punch. Probably a gut punch. He is finally weighing in and saying publicly, at least in one prong, new trials for these two, he does not agree. Doesn't think the case has what it takes. The two pieces of evidence not strong enough. And then their lawyer came out and was big with words on this show. Says the 90s called, wants their DA back. Well, that DA is here tonight to answer to that and also to answer to why. Why does he think that that new trial case, this habeas case, just doesn't have teeth? What about resentencing, prong 2? What about the governor's clemency, prong 3? I got all those questions for Nathan Hawkman. He's here live. Also, speaking of California, there's a huge manhunt on right now. I don't know if you know this, but there's breaking news even as I was running to the camera. That woman looks awfully friendly on the picture, but the police say she's a homicidal maniac and that she's on the run, and it's a manhunt / woman hunt because they say that she not only killed her spouse, who was a hero firefighter in the LA fires, but had done the same thing years ago. That this may be a full-on repeat. Hero firefighter dead, spouse on the run. Spouse has done it before. And we've got brand new details of Ring doorbell camera video showing what may be the murder actually in progress. I've got that for you as well. And then also, in an update to Friday's story, I couldn't shake this all weekend. I found myself like just searching for details on this story, this house. It's not just a hoarder's house of hell, a house of filth. It is a prison of 3 children who lived there alone. For 5 years, they were left alone in this. It's not fit for animals. Imagine a mother who could abandon a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 7-year-old and say, you're on your own. This is what it looked like once they were rescued 5 years later. We have new details about what was going on in that house, how those little kids passed their days, why they were terrified to even open the door and ever step foot outside that house. And we have the name and photo of the mom, and that is coming all ahead in just the next little bit. But it's been almost 35 years to the day since Lyle and Eric Menendez were handcuffed and hauled off to jail for the shotgun murders of their parents. Lyle was arrested first, and that was on March 8th of 1990. Eric was arrested 3 days later at the airport. They have not had a free breath of air since. Today, Lyle is 57. Eric is 54. And if nothing changes, they are going to die the way they have lived their whole adult lives as prisoners. But something could change. It is still possible. They've got a hearing next month on getting their sentences reduced. And the new DA in Los Angeles isn't really tipping his hand on how he's going to weigh in on that. But hey, whoa, as for the second path to freedom, as for getting brand new trials, oh, we got an earful because late last week, DA firmly weighed in that he does not think that should happen. That new DA is Nathan Hawkman. He's very different from the old DA. That old DA was an ally of the brothers and even helped in all their pathways to freedom. But last Friday, that new DA, Nathan Hawkman, he took to the microphones and he reminded everyone why Eric and Lyle are in prison to begin with. And he rejected their bid for new trials. The Menendez brothers have an attorney. He's very, very famous. And then he's a friend of the show. It's Mark Garagos, lead attorney. And he had a lot to say about this new DA after DA Hawkman held the press conference. Here's just a little taste of it.
I jokingly say that Nathan Hawkman, who I've known of for many years, was elected because the 90s were calling and they wanted their DA's office back. And he did a splendid job of rehashing all of the 90s prosecutorial kind of platitudes. You've now trotted out this idea that somehow they're liars back then, and so therefore we shouldn't deal with the new evidence. The habeas is based on two pieces of evidence. It's based on a letter that was written by Eric to his cousin Andy, and it's based on a declaration by a gentleman, as you mentioned, from Menudo named Roy Rosello. All of this was really kabuki theater today. The habeas that was filed today that I got 1 minute before the press conference is the almost virtually identical habeas that was going to be filed by the same group of disgruntled internal prosecutors that were back then in the DA's office or have survived since and are still there today.
That was Garagos. This is Hawkman. I'm pleased to welcome Nathan Hawkman, the Los Angeles County District Attorney, back to the program. Good to have you here. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've got a very busy schedule, so much appreciated. Ouch. The 90s called, and they want their DA's office back. I get it. I think I get what he's saying. I think what he's saying is, DA Hawkman, it's nothing different than was said in the 90s, and we are now in the 2000s, which are very different. Does Garagos have a point there, despite how it was put?
Not at all. What we did to get ready for the habeas motion, and you were correct in pointing out that the Menendez case is on 3 different tracks. The first is a habeas motion where they're trying to get a new trial. This wouldn't get them out. It would only get them a new trial, but the standards are very high to get a new trial. In fact, the same exact arguments that Mr. Garagos has brought up have been rejected by the trial judge, the California Court of Appeals, the California Supreme Court on direct appeal, the California Supreme Court on habeas appeal, then the U.S. District Court and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on habeas federal relief. So his arguments have been rejected literally every time they've been raised in 6 different courts. So what he's basically said is that he's got 2 new pieces of evidence, but those new pieces of evidence have to be subject to the rigid criteria of a habeas motion. They have to be timely, they have to be presented without substantial delay, they have to be admissible, and they have to be credible. And we went through each one of those factors to show that, for instance, the Eric Menendez to Andy Cano letter is supposedly sent in December of 1988. The problem with that, this undated photocopy of a letter, is that Eric Menendez testified for 7 days at his trial, a bit in graphic detail about the sexual abuse he experienced from his father. Andy Cano also testified in the first and the second trial. They said that the last time they had communicated about sexual abuse was 6 years before the 1989 murders in 1983. They were asked these questions many times, and they said the only time they had ever communicated was in 1983, when Andy Cano was 10 and Eric Menendez was 12 or 13. Voila, in 2023, we have a letter submitted, supposedly dated in 1988, that was never, ever mentioned during the trial. So that letter, we have great issues with its credibility. Again, because if it existed, it would have been used in the 1993 trial or certainly the 1995 trials. Certainly.
And it's a very cogent argument you make. You're much better at this than I am, but I want to play devil's advocate on that for just a moment. As a mom of boys, and I'm a mom of teenage boys who cannot remember what they had for breakfast. And I think about Andy Cano at 14 years old writing that letter. And I've read the letter, and it's about a lot of things. In the middle, there's the issue of, and it's Eric writing the letter to Andy. In the middle of it, there's the mention, very nebulously so, no words saying sex abuse, but it's happening again, Andy. And then the letter went into our pile of teenage things in our room, only to be found many, many years later by his parents after he died. Isn't it a fair argument to make that a 14-year-old would probably have no idea that there was a communication about sex abuse in a letter that was buried in the middle somewhere and never referenced as sex abuse, and that no one would ever know about it till it was discovered by those parents? Isn't it fair to say that is possible with a teenage boy who wouldn't even have remembered it even when on the stand?
It's not fair because the letter was written by Eric Menendez when he was 18. And remember, they were looking for evidence to show that the sexual abuse had existed for years, from the ages for him from 6 to 18. So the best evidence they could come up with corroborating it occurred in a conversation that happened several times 6 years before the 1989 murders. Now, I will assure you, if Eric Menendez had written that letter in December of 1988, 9 months before the murders, he would have used that to show that the sexual abuse was being discussed well before the murders, 9 months before the murders, not 6 years before the murders. But more importantly, the issue of both the letter between Menendez and Cano and the Roy Rosello declaration. Remember, that's a declaration where Roy Rosello says he was sexually abused by Jose Menendez in the early 1980s. The problem is the Menendez brothers never knew that until the 2020s. So it could not have played part of their state of mind during the August 1989 murders. But both pieces of evidence go to the sexual abuse defense, but it was not the legal defense at trial. What I pointed out is that Garagos has contradicted Leslie Abrahamson when she said categorically that sexual abuse does not justify the killing. She said it never did and it never will, and that they would never make that argument. Voila, 30 years later, apparently Garagos forgot to actually consult with the prior counsel, who explained that sexual abuse is not the defense. It was always self-defense, the actual fear of imminent harm that their parents were going to kill them the night of August 20th, 1989. These two new pieces of evidence add nothing to the self-defense argument that they had. They are only additional information to the 7 days of testimony that Eric Menendez gave on sexual abuse, as well as the testimony that Andy Cano gave. So again, to meet the rigorous standards to get a new trial of timely, admissible, credible evidence that would more likely than not change the outcome of the trial, these two pieces of evidence don't even come close.
I'm still on the credible only because, and I could probably have an hour-long conversation with you just on this letter. And you said Eric was what? Was he 19 when he wrote the letter to his cousin Andy? And I guess Andy was 14. I can see, was he 19? Was that it? 18. Okay. So I have an 18-year-old, and I can totally see how he would never remember that throwaway line in the middle of the letter. It's still happening, Andy, because the letter, again, was about everything. It wasn't about just sex abuse. It wasn't, hey, Andy, I got to write you something. This is happening. Help me. That wasn't the letter. The letter was, summer was great and things were happening. And by the way, it's still happening. And here's the rest of my letter. And I just look at teenage boys. They're morons. You know, I love them, but they're morons. And I just feel as though it is possible that Eric would never have remembered that line that he wrote in a letter when he was 18, and Andy probably never would remember it when he was 14. And that's all I ask. Isn't it possible that there's credibility to the letter, even if both of those boys got on the stand and never mentioned it?
No. And the reason it's not is that you gave us an example of a hypothetical 18-year-old and 14-year-old that are, going to the park, playing sports, going to schools. Eric Menendez is sitting behind bars. He's putting together his defense with his lawyers. They are searching for all evidence, and all they came up with is a conversations between Andy Cano and Eric Menendez. If they actually had something in writing, and certainly Eric would remember something he wrote 9 months, not 6 years.
That's where I differ. That's where I differ. DA, again, okay, you're much better at this than I, but that is where I differ. Certainly he would remember that he wrote this tiny line in the middle of a very long letter about summer and fun and family. And again, we also have to put our heads on from 1990, right? And 88 and 85 and 84. We never spoke of these things. We never spoke at length. We certainly never wrote them in those words, sex abuse. It was just kind of a throwaway mention. It's still happening, Andy. I could see them forgetting that they'd written that.
So the letter comes to light, apparently, in 2015 during a Barbara Walters special on this case. But they waited 8 years till 2023 to actually present this letter in a habeas motion. And part of the habeas criteria says you cannot engage in substantial delay. The Supreme Court says anything more than 5 years is substantial delay. So even if you assume under your theory that somehow Eric Menendez forgot about the letter during his 1993 trial, forgot about it during his 1995 trial, didn't learn about it till 2015, he still does not meet the requirements of a habeas because he engaged in substantial delay of 8 years before he actually brought it forward. And this is years and years after Andy Kano had passed, so he's not around to cross-examine about the letter.
I have forgotten crushes that I had at 14, much more substantial than a few lines in a letter. That's all I say. I could, like I said, I could go on forever on this. I do want to ask you about resentencing because that's the next prong. And I feel like I'm getting an idea that you're not big on resentencing either. I think you've got some plans to go public with your strategy, your theory, your thoughts, and your I guess your plans, whether you'll weigh in or not. Can you tell me a little bit more about where your head is at with resentencing?
Certainly. So resentencing, different than the habeas motion, which the habeas motion only focuses on what happened at the trial. The resentencing motion is something somewhat unique for California and says that a judge can turn a sentence of life without the possibility of parole into life with the possibility of parole, and can consider a variety of factors beyond the trial. The judge can consider sort of looking at it as a before, during, and after situation. Before, what got the Menendezes in this situation to kill their parents? During, obviously, he's got to consider the facts of the case. After, he can consider rehabilitation that the Menendezes have engaged in since they have been in prison over the last 35 years. And even if the judge makes the decision to resentence to life with the possibility of parole, the next step is the parole board. And the parole board would then have to grant parole. And the final step is to go to Governor Newsom, because he has 120 days to either affirm the grant of parole or reverse it. And as an example of a situation recently where he reversed a grant of parole, I take you to the case of Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin of Robert F. Kennedy in Los Angeles in 1968. In that case, the parole board had denied parole 15 times in a row for 40 years. But on the 16th time in 2021, they granted Sirhan Sirhan parole when he was in his late 70s in diminishing health. And basically was at the point where he made the argument he was no longer a danger to public safety. But Governor Newsom reversed that grant of parole, saying that Sirhan Sirhan had not fully exhibited insight to his crime. He had not accepted full responsibility for what he had done wrong. Therefore, he constituted a danger, even though he basically didn't diminish.
I have a minute left. I'm only jumping in because I only have a minute left. I hate interrupting, but I want to get your thoughts on this. It's so important. The Menendez brothers have taken responsibility for it. They have acknowledged they have done incredible things. I don't think Sirhan Sirhan did anything near what the boys have done. Can you tell me one way or the other? I love that you outlined the process because you're very good at this. But how you feel about it. Will you submit a brief? Will you have a microphone moment where you say, I'm not supporting this either, or will you support the resentencing? And how do you feel about Gavin Newsom either signing parole if they get it or granting clemency? He could do two things.
So let me answer the last question first. Gavin Newsom can do the same analysis we did, review over 50,000 pages of trial transcripts, speak to defense attorneys, Menendez family members, prosecutors, law enforcement, do the hard work, and he could grant clemency and commute the sentence today or any day and release the Menendezes. He also, at the end of the process, can do that same work and decide if parole is recommended to grant or reverse parole. As far as we're concerned, within the next 2 weeks, we will be filing our position in connection with the resentencing. And what we're in the process of doing is not just going through the trial, as we've described in the habeas petition, but also going into the before and the after. What led the Menendezes to commit the crime and the rehabilitation they've engaged in since the crime in order to determine what the position should be.
But you're not going to tip your hat one way or the other tonight?
Again, I don't engage in hints, winks, suggestions. We're going to just rely on the facts and the law. And when we put our position out after that, I'm certainly happy to explain it in detail.
I'm guessing that will be before the March hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we make a booking now? Just tell me the date.
We will figure out a good booking to reappear on this show.
You can't blame a girl for trying. DA Nathan Hawkman, I always love our conversations, and like I said, it could be an hour. Come on my podcast. We'll talk for a whole hour. Would that be all right?
We'll see if we can arrange that as well.
Okay, thank you. Look forward to our next meeting.
Very good. Thank you very much.
And we will continue to follow that. I promise you. It's we're all very highly invested in this story. 3 different pathways. Still to come tonight, however, another big story that we're following: the search for a homicidal slasher in Southern California. 25 years after fatally stabbing her husband, she is now suspected of doing the very same thing to her wife. And that wife was a firefighting hero, fresh off of battling the LA wildfires. The latest on the manhunt for the killer, and tributes to this victim that are going on as we speak. That's next.
Relieves allergies while you sleep, so you wake refreshed for a more productive day. Get 24-hour continuous relief that does not fade. Be wise all, take Zysol at night.
Oh, I wish my TV provider let me choose what I pay for.
Sling lets you do that, Clock Boy.
Choose and customize your channel lineup or pause and watch for free. Sling lets you do that.
On Valentine's Day last month, Yolanda Moroi posted a photo of her wife of 2 years, a woman named Rebecca, and the caption gives me chills. It says, "She is an angel to so many, but especially to me." Rebecca Moroi was a California firefighter with 30 years on the job, achieving the rank of captain in 2022. Rebecca lived near San Diego, but was recently part of the life-saving firefighting crews in Los Angeles, specifically fighting that devastating Eaton fire. And yes, I am using the past tense because 3 days after that Valentine's Day post, Rebecca was found stabbed to death. And 3 days after that, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department ID'd a suspect, Yolanda Moroi, Rebecca's spouse. And where is Yolanda tonight? Homeland Security says she is in Mexico. They got a brand new arrest warrant, and it reportedly says that after stabbing Rebecca to death, she changed her clothes, she gathered her pets and luggage, and drove away in this, a 2013 Chevy Equinox with California plates. The warrant also says that about a week before the murder, Rebecca, the victim, told Yolanda, her wife, that she was leaving her and ending the marriage. The murder itself was reported by Rebecca's mom, because Rebecca's mom had a ring cam with footage of 2 people believed to be Rebecca and Yolanda running across a patio. Rebecca, the victim, is heard yelling, "Yolanda, please, I don't want to die." She appears to have blood on her back, and a voice that is thought to be Yolanda's then says, "You should have thought of that before." The figures then enter the home, and only one of them comes out, Yolanda. And if that is not shocking, buckle up. The suspect, Yolanda, has done it before. The exact same thing. Except in the year 2000, her victim was her husband. Same weapon, same method, same story. Back then, she was charged with murder, but she pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, and she served just 9 years. She has been out since 2013. I'm joined now by Fran George, a longtime friend of Rebecca's, who, as we speak, is at a celebration of Rebecca's life. Fran, I am so sorry for the loss that you are coping with, especially on a night like tonight, where you're celebrating Becca's life. This news has just come in the last, I want to say 45 minutes, that there's an arrest warrant showing ring camera video exists with Yolanda chasing Becca, and Becca saying, I don't want to die, and Yolanda saying, you should have thought of that before. How do you process details when you are learning these things about your friend?
It has been more than just a little difficult. No one thinks that their friend is going to be murdered by their own spouse, and certainly not the hero that Becky is. Becky was strong and funny, and everybody loved being around her. We had our own little group, and it was amazing. And it's sad that we can't have that time anymore.
It's so upsetting to think someone as unbelievable, as Captain Moroi had this spouse with a murder in her past. She didn't plead to murder, but stabbed her husband to death and served 9 years. Did Becky know about this, or do you know if Becky knew about Yolanda's killing past?
Well, I'm not sure if she did or not, because when they got together, Yolanda basically kept Becky from us. So we didn't know much about her at all.
And what did you know about her? I mean, as limited as it was, it's so upsetting to think that you've got this friend who's gone off and married someone and has cut you off. What did you know about her?
Well, I know that she managed to get one of the pretty awesome people to fall in love with her and marry her. She got our Becky to fall in love with her. She got our Becky to marry her. And that's basically all I know.
What do you make about this Valentine's Day post? Yolanda posts, just days before the murder, this is my angel, and she's, the most unbelievable angel. Do you think that this was a moment where they were, this was Becky saying she was going to leave Yolanda? Do you think it just exploded that moment, or do you think this had been building?
I think that was just one of Yolanda's way of covering, of just putting out that face so no one would expect anything or suspect anything.
Do you think she was planning? Do you think she was planning something 3 days later? Do you think she was planning to kill Becky?
I have no way of knowing that. But it's just sad that she put that out there like that.
I'm seeing this picture of your friend Becky in her uniform, a captain, a firefighter, a hero who just finished working on the Eaton fire. Yeah. Tell me what we should know about your dear friend Becky.
You should know Becky would go out for anybody and do whatever needs to be done. She was the epitome of a hero. She always had your back. You could always count on Becky. She'll make you laugh. She'll make you smile. She'll make you feel good. Even looking at her picture makes me smile, although it's through this, and I'm actually at an event right now to honor her. You need to know that she was a real one, for sure.
Fran George, thank you so much for paying tribute to your friend. Welcome. And we will continue to follow this manhunt and the search for Yolanda Moroi. Anyone with information should know as well that they should call the San Diego County Sheriff's Office. And Fran, I'm going to put that number up on the screen right now. It's 858-285-6330. Again, if you know anything about Yolanda Moroi's whereabouts, call San Diego Sheriff's Office at the number on your screen. Take a picture of your screen, a screen grab. We'll continue to follow this manhunt. I don't know how many times I have reported before on this next story, and a version of it, someone's dirty little secret. But nothing is ever going to compare to a mother's secret in Detroit. She kept her 3 kids a secret from family from their dad, even from herself. And that last one, I know, that's hard to make sense of. But hear me out. She closed those children off in a house when they were just 10, 8, and 7, and she never looked back. For the last 5 years, those children survived alone in a squalid rental with the occasional DoorDash delivery of food. Now that mom's name is being made public, and so is her picture. And the details of how she kept those kids prisoner, those are being made public too. That's next. Tonight, a big development in a case we brought you last week. 3 kids left abandoned in a home near Detroit for nearly 5 years. We now know a lot more about their mom and what the judge thinks of her. Her bond has been set at $250 million, cash only. In other words, she is not getting out. As a reminder of the jaw-dropping details of her alleged crimes, her 3 children were found by sheriff's deputies in Oakland County in conditions that the sheriff called deplorable even for an animal. They were all alone in a rented home, and that's the home. That's what they were living in. That home was piled 4 feet high with garbage. It was overrun with mold and feces, and they had been alone for about 5 years, since they were 7, 8, and 10 years old. Video obtained by Metro Detroit News shows the extent of the vile conditions that these children were living in. Again, alone. The kids thought that they'd been abandoned sometime between 2020 and 2021. In all that time, it is believed the only child ever to step outside those rancid walls was the boy, the oldest sibling, who's now 15. And even then, it was only twice. Once to check the mail, and once to simply, quote, feel the grass under his feet. He was also the only one to have contact with his mother. And only then when the kids needed food, which he said Mom would send by Instacart or DoorDash. Investigators say that Mom never made actual physical contact with the kids and never sent them anything like basic necessities, toilet paper, soap, shampoo. They had nothing. They had none of it for 5 years. And when the kids were finally rescued and rushed to a hospital, they struggled with basic, simple things like brushing their teeth or how to flush a toilet. The toilets in the home had overflowed and basically had stopped working. And so feces was literally found everywhere in the apartment. Police say the children's toenails were so long they could hardly walk. So this is their mom. There she is. That's Kelly Bryant. I don't know if you noticed it, but I think she looks very well groomed. Her hair looks terrific. Her eyebrows seem to be very well kept. Her kids couldn't walk because of toenails. This 34-year-old woman is now facing 3 counts of first-degree child abuse. The kids are now 15, 13, and 12. The younger 2 are girls, and all 3 were so afraid when police arrived, they hid. The girls even locked themselves in the bathroom. And the reason that they never stepped outside the home in all those years, they said they were afraid of what their mom might do to them. So they stayed inside with the blinds closed, and they watched TV and they played video games for 5 years in that. The boys slept on a mattress. The girls, they slept on pizza boxes. Prosecutors say Kelly Bryant was hiding the kids from her family and lying about where they were. As for Dad, when he got out of prison, a judge gave him visitation. That was back in 2022. But Mom, Kelly Bryant, refused to produce the kids. And as for that sky-high $250 million bond, the judge called Kelly Bryant, and I quote, an acute risk and danger to the community and to any minor children under the age of 18, let alone the 3 minor children that she is a mother to. Judge also believes that Bryant would, quote, continue to engage in fear tactics to keep the children from talking. Kelly Bryant is due in court next week. It's a probable cause conference, and you better believe we will be there. A judge in Tennessee just sentenced a child pornographer and alleged serial rapist to 95 years in prison. That is the longest sentence that the law allows. If your first reaction is great, good riddance, don't count your chickens because this cretin's name is Shawn Williams. Why? I doubt he will be in prison for very long. That's next.
Progress is having your coffee like you like it. The Freestyle Libre 3 Plus sensor is covered by Medicare for more people managing diabetes with insulin. This is progress. Ask your doctor today.
On paper, Shawn Williams is never getting out of prison. A federal judge in Tennessee just sentenced him to 95 years today, the absolute max he could get. Williams, make no mistake, is bottom of the barrel. Convicted of enticing minors into sex acts for the purpose of child pornography. And when I say minors, I mean babies in diapers. For most degenerates like Williams, we would lock them up and look forward to forgetting them. But Shawn Williams is next level. In addition to being a child molester, serial molester, and alleged serial rapist, he's also been a serial escapee. In fact, 5 of the 95 years that he got today are for breaking out of a prison van that was transporting him to court back in October of 23. Here's a reminder about that. The Manhunt was on for a month before a 7-Eleven clerk called in a tip and a canine took him down. And that's what he looked like when they brought him in. And as if that's not enough, in the months before he pulled that little stunt, he was caught trying to break out of his jail cell too. And just today, before his 95-year sentencing, prosecutors say he was hiding razor blades in his shoes. The judge called Williams second only to a serial killer in terms of damage inflicted on his victims. And reportedly, when the judge said that guy laughed in court. It's maybe because he's been compared to a serial killer before, specifically Ted Bundy, who, I don't know, he strongly resembles, and who also liked to escape multiple times. Bundy did it twice. But guess what? Whether Williams somehow becomes a fugitive again or not, we are likely to see him again anyway. And that is because he still faces more child rape charges in state court and a separate batch of drug and child porn charges in federal court. And he's still suspected of drugging and raping nearly 50 women, videotaping the rapes while they were unconscious. Presumably, he's going to face charges for those someday, maybe. I want to bring in Jeff Keeling. He's a reporter with our NewsNation affiliate, WJHL. He was in court for Williams' sentencing. It's good to see you again, Jeff. Thanks for being here. Williams really laughed, like out loud enough for the judge and everyone to hear it?
Certainly loud enough for the judge to hear it. And Judge Ronnie Greer has exercised the patience of Job with this guy. He's known for his antics in the courtroom. And yes, the judge was talking about how serious he was considering the crimes that Williams had committed and talked about serial killers, and Williams laughed. I mean, he a few minutes later, he said, "I don't want to hear anything more from you," because he kind of reached the end of his rope. So, I could hear it.
Wow. I mean, patience of Job was a good way to put it. I don't know what I'd have done if he'd laughed in my courtroom. Let me ask you this about the victims. Were his victims in court today? Did they have reaction if they were there?
So I know that there were some family members of victims there. I could hear people crying behind me. I mean, it was pretty emotional. It lasted about an hour and a half. You had the prosecutor gunning for the whole 95 years, and then the defense attorney, and then Shawn getting his chance to speak. And yeah, there were audible sobs from people for sure.
Understandable. Razor blades in his shoes before the hearing. Wow. I don't know how he got them in there. I don't know when they got them, when they found them, what kind of searches he's going through. I can't imagine they don't strip search him every time he takes 2 steps. But what is the manpower on this guy as they move him about the cabin?
I think it's much more significant than it was when he escaped from that prison van that we talked about, well over a year ago now. That was a contracted, local sheriff's office. Now it's all federal guys and women, and the marshals are taking him to Federal Correction Institute in Elkton, Ohio now. And, I'm sure the people up there, and most certainly, though, Ashleigh, his victims and their family members are hoping and praying that he is not able to pull some sort of escape, because that would just really be difficult for all these people who, as the judge says and the prosecutor says, have been so traumatized by this guy over a number of years.
I feel like they should transport him like Hannibal Lecter from now on. Jeff Keeling, I always love talking to you. Thank you for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Ashleigh.
And we'll be calling you again, because clearly he's coming back for more. Okay, folks, have you ever literally seen someone running for their life? You're about to. Security cameras caught a woman being chased around her car by an actual hitman. I'm going to play the whole terrifying scene for you, and I tell you how it ended as well after the break. The words caught on video don't really pack the same punch that they used to. Nowadays, what isn't caught on video? Well, I, for one, had not seen a murder for hire with a terrified victim running from the gun-wielding hitman. But now that is on video, too. I take you to San Bernardino, California. The date was January 10th, just a few weeks ago. This is Jessica Torres as she's walking out of a restaurant and getting into her car. Suddenly, an SUV drives up, and a gunman hops out. Torres then jumps out of her vehicle and struggles with the gunman, even briefly grabbing his gun. A bystander runs up to help, but takes off when the gunman starts firing. Police say the man fired 9 rounds in all. The final 2 rounds, those hit Jessica. The first shot slowed her down, but the second shot as she was running, that killed her. You can see that was it. That was it right there. At first, the police thought this was an armed robbery because the gunman had grabbed her designer bag, but they quickly realized this was a husband who allegedly hired 4 men to pull off a hit on his wife, whom he was divorcing. 5 men are now facing murder charges, including that husband. They are all due in court March 14th. Take a good look. We'll follow. Does it for us. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to check out the NewsNation app. And Cuomo is coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, everybody in the land of NewsNation. News for all America. What does that mean? 360 view. We got to get different perspectives. We have to look at it different ways. I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for being with me right now. And I do believe I have the answer to a very common and vexing question. I mean, I can't give it to you until they move the teleprompter, although I did write it, so I can probably ad-lib the whole thing, but it'll probably take twice as long. I'm just kidding. So this is the common question, okay? Why do people not seem to all be on board with wanting to cut spending? Why?